Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This is going to be my Star Trek Picard Episode 2 video. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs for classic Star Trek, Next Generation, the Next Generation movies, so if you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. Obviously careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet because we'll be talking about everything. We'll just do top 10 WTF in Easter eggs as we go along. Starting with number 10, the Utopia Planitia Shipyards flashback. They show us what we thought was the synthetic revolt that happened 14 years ago, part of the big catastrophe that caused Picard to leave Starfleet. It didn't go down quite the way I expected it to. There are a couple of things I think that they haven't revealed yet, but they're just kind of laying seeds that they'll reveal later on in the series. We find out they were using armies of androids that all look very similar to Data, like they were based on Data in B4, to work the shipyards. It makes sense. They have some exposition that reminds you just how much faster, smarter, more powerful they are than normal humans. There's a real big Star Trek First Contact Easter egg when the human workers complain that they have to work on First Contact Day while the rest of the Federation gets the day off, which is obviously a reference to Star Trek The First Contact movie, the day that Vulcans officially made first contact with humans via Zefram Cochrane. They reference it on a bunch of different Star Trek series. The F8 android they introduce acts a lot like Data from the Star Trek Next Generation pilot episode Encounter at Farpoint, not understanding jokes at all. There's a reference to the replicator technology, Una matrices, or something they referenced during the Short Treks episode by Spock on the Enterprise. Right before F8 seemingly revolts, we see his eyes look like they're processing some sort of code update or an upload. I think that's just a seed that they're laying, like maybe something happened, someone tried to reprogram them so that they would revolt. Maybe this is part of the Zhat Vash plan. Whatever the case is, it's not just a simple revolt. It's not like they suddenly turned on their masters with no cause. Somebody seems like they were manipulating the androids to do this. The actual revolt itself was also featured in the Short Treks episode called Children of Mars, but F8 kills everyone, reprograms the orbital defense system to fire on the planet, and it causes all the casualties. Number 9 WTF, we learn that Picard's companions are former members of the Romulan Tal Shiar secret police, but as Laris corrects him on a bunch of his assumptions about the inner workings of Romulan military, their culture, their technology, their forensic methods, the title of the episode is called Maps and Legends. That's a reference to a couple different things, one of them being the many different legends about the history of the Romulan culture, but also a literal reference to the legend part of a map, which is the section of a map that helps you decode the symbols on each map. Later, Picard uses the Romulan forensic technology to slowly build himself a map. It's not quite done yet, to Soji's character. They don't know that she's on the Borg cube yet, so I'm assuming they're going to learn that in the next couple of episodes. Loris also name drops Romulan ale and the Gorns when she talks about the Gorn hegemony. She also jokes that only the Tal Shiar could protect him from the other Romulans in Tal Shiar, so I think that he just helped save them during the big Romulan catastrophe in the supernova, and that's why they're with him now. Number 8 WTF, the Zhat Vash, the double secret Romulan police. So just as the title of the episode was about legends, she explains the legend of the Romulans' version of basically Baba Yaga, the boogeyman that the Romulans would tell new recruits about to scare them. But it kind of sets the stage for one of the big battles this season, like what's going on behind the scenes, who's really trying to pull these strings. The Zhat Vash have this plan to eliminate all synthetic life from the galaxy, or apparently that's always been their goal. They must have hated Data back in the day, but Laris explains that the organization has been around for centuries, operating from the shadows since the dawn of artificial intelligence and advanced computing in the Romulan society. But that's who Narek is working for, the Romulan we met last week who's trying to work Soji on the Borg cube. Number 7 WTF, Picard meets his old shipmate from the Stargazer. There were a couple Stargazer references in episode 1. Dr. Benny Yoon, I think he's the only other crewmate of Picard's other than Wesley Crusher's father that we've met that was also on the Stargazer. He's talked about the Stargazer a lot during Next Generation episodes, but we never really met a lot of the other crew members from that ship. He drops a big reference to the Star Trek Next Generation series finale, too. All good things. He says Picard has a flare-up issue in his parietal lobe. We found out during the series finale in those flash forwards when it was the older version of Picard on his vineyard, just like he is during this series. The syndrome caused him to have all kinds of visions, and eventually they were going to wind up killing him. So the doctor is basically telling him that this is going to kill you very soon, so hopefully your adventure will kill you first. The old doctor visiting him to certify him fit for duty is also a nice callback to Bones from original Star Trek visiting Kirk to diagnose him before another big adventure. Number 6, Picard goes back to Starfleet headquarters in San Francisco. Everyone probably recognized the classic Star Trek theme song notes playing mixed with a little bit of the theme song from Star Trek The Next Generation as he stepped through that transporter. If you've ever been to a convention in Anaheim, you also probably recognize the Anaheim Convention Center that they used to film this episode. It's serving as the facade for Starfleet. When he steps into the building, there are a bunch of holograms above cycling through the various versions of the Enterprise, and then they have that funny joke of the desk clerk not recognizing him because he hasn't been around in forever. It's a bit of a meta joke also about Patrick Stewart in real life not having done Star Trek in so long. Like, wait a minute, who are you again? What's your name? Whole bunch more next-gen Easter eggs. So when he visits the Admiral, Clancy, she's actually a former crew member from the Enterprise who was an ensign during Star Trek The Next Generation, and it's played by the same actress who came back. Obviously, in real life, she's much older now, so they both look much older. So when they say they haven't always seen eye to eye, it's implied that later in their careers, when they had risen through the ranks, they had problems with each other. She's portrayed as more of a tragic character than I think an antagonist. She flat out denies his request for reinstatement under the pretense that all of Starfleet's decision about who lives, who dies, what they did during the Romulan incident is to keep the Federation together. So even though she comes off like a villain, she's not trying to be evil. Picard just feels like the situation is much simpler. All life is precious. They don't get to make the choice about who lives and who dies. If you've been keeping track, they also dropped the second and third F-bombs ever heard during any Star Trek series in history or any movie. The very first F-bomb ever uttered on any kind of Star Trek program was during Star Trek Discovery this past year. Number 5, WTF, all the Next Generation shoutouts. He references Worf, Geordi LaForge, Riker, Beverly Crusher, all his former senior officers who are still alive. He says he doesn't want to burden them because they'd sacrifice themselves at the drop of a hat out of loyalty to him, putting themselves in grave danger. But speaking in a very meta way, this is also how the writers and the producers justify not having all the original Next Gen cast members guest star during Season 1. Really good example of this, they've talked about bringing Worf back, Beverly Crusher, during Season 2, but as far as I know, Riker and Troi are the biggest ones coming back during Season 1. But like this episode with the Admiral, and in future episodes, there'll be a ton of minor characters coming back from Next Gen. So if you've been watching Next Gen recently, or if you're just a hardcore fan, you'll probably recognize a lot of these people. Number 4, the Raffi character that he goes to ask help for is a former colleague from the Romulan incident who ran into trouble with Picard and kind of got thrown under the bus, so that's why she hates him so much. He brings a huge Easter egg with him, the 1986 Chateau Picard bottle of wine. 1986 is a reference to the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation, which actually didn't air until 1987, but October 1986 is when Gene Roddenberry made the first official public announcement that they were bringing Star Trek back and doing Star Trek The Next Generation. She's going to be one of the other new main characters this season. There's still a couple of big ones that just haven't debuted yet in episodes. The place where she lives is also a deep cut for classic Trek. It's called Vasquez Rocks. That's the place in Southern California in real life where they filmed Kirk fighting the Gorn. Picard makes a huge Isaac Asimov joke when he's speaking to Alison Pill's character, "Oh, you like the classics." The Isaac Asimov book she's reading is also a reference to the 3 laws of robotics. Rule number 1, never harm a human, which I think is meant to link it back to the beginning of the episode in the flashbacks when we saw the androids revolt on Utopia Planitia. Remember, I said though, it's probably not that simple. There's probably something else going on behind this quote-unquote revolt, like maybe the Zhat Vash was secretly reprogramming them. Number 3, on the Borg cube, we learn what it is that the Romulans have been doing, salvaging Borg technology. And it's all primarily a Romulan operation, but it's kind of joint with the Federation because it's this really big treaty, but it's the Borg cube that followed Captain Janeway through the wormhole into the Alpha Quadrant in the Star Trek Voyager finale. It wasn't totally clear where the cube came from until this episode. They explained that it's technically been dormant for about the last 16 years or so. The collective severed their link to it, and each of the surviving drones went into stasis. The whole thing is they'll reactivate if you get too close, so they make a couple references to that during the episode. They refer to a gray area to stay away from. All the badges that they wear are meant to mask their signatures from the Borg drones and technology. I think that's just to let you know that there are probably going to be some quote-unquote accidents in future episodes, and there might be one or more assimilations, because there's a very notable sign that says over 5,000 days since the last assimilation. I feel like that's the writers telling us that there's probably going to be an assimilation sometime in a future episode. Number 2 though, big reveal, the secret Romulan Zhat Vash plot within the Federation. Wouldn't be a Star Trek series if there wasn't some secret plot within the Federation. So like I said, the former crewmate Admiral that Picard spoke to isn't overtly meant to be a villain, but clearly there are other elements within Starfleet that are far more insidious, primarily talking about the Commodore, who may or may not also secretly be a Romulan trying to look like a Vulcan. because there's a lot of Vulcan stuff on her desk, so I think outwardly she's supposed to be a Vulcan, but because her underling is also a Romulan disguised to look like a human, she also might be disguised to look like a Vulcan. It seems like their long-term plan is to stop synthetics from prospering around the galaxy, but if she's working with the Zhat Vash, or if she's a member of the Zhat Vash and she's a Commodore, it would have taken her years and years to rise through the ranks in Starfleet. So either the Commodore just shares their goals and they're temporarily aligned, or she is also secretly a Romulan plant that just rose through the ranks in Starfleet over the course of 30 or 40 years. Like I said, her subordinate has been permanently surgically altered to look human. She's being played by Peyton List. You might recognize that actress from The Flash. She played Golden Glider. She was also Poison Ivy on Gotham. She's also revealed to be the sister of Ethan Peck's Narek Romulan character, and they're the ones behind the Romulan strike team that killed Daj in episode 1 and are now trying to get her sister Soji. But number 1, big WTF, we learned what the Zhat Vash's secret plan is, why they're doing all this stuff, why they're trying to get Soji, why they accidentally killed Daj when they were really trying to capture her to interrogate her. Is because they're searching for what they think is a nest, quote-unquote, they call it a nest, with many more copies of purely biological androids just like them. It seems like they think that Maddox created a bunch of other androids in secret somewhere, they just don't know where he is, they're trying to find him just like Picard is also trying to find him. So the plot thickens, I love all the Borg stuff that they're doing on the show, but let me know in the comments if you spotted any big Star Trek Easter eggs that I didn't mention in the video. Episode 3 is going to be next week, so everyone click here for my Star Trek Picard Episode 1 video, and click here for my brand new Marvel Eternals teaser breakdown. Thank you so much for watching, everybody stay awesome, I'll see you guys tonight.